I'm Nick Knutson, joined by Will Miles. Welcome to Stand Up and Holler. On this week's episode, we'll cover Friday Night Lights, JT Daniels' evaluation on reader reaction, courtesy of Will Miles. In 2022 prospect, number one prospect quarterback Quinn Ewers decides to skip his senior year of high school. Thank you, NIL. And a couple fall camp questions as we head out. So, Will, first off, Friday Night Lights this past week, man. Let's jump into two bits right away. Got a few commits. I know we were talking earlier, and you were saying there's a couple years ago there wasn't any commits off of this, so it is some progress, but maybe not like the tons of commits that you want to see out of it. But there's at least a few.
Yeah, I mean, I think historically, you look at Friday Night Lights, 2 or 3 commitments coming out of that particular event is pretty good. So, Terrence Gibbs, the running back out of Winter Park, he commits. That's a guy who he was ranked 49th overall in late 2019, hurt his knee, tore his ACL, and then they've sort of dropped him down, but he hasn't really had an opportunity to play since he hurt his ACL, right? I mean, you've had COVID going through, you've had all the sort of weirdness the last couple of years. And so where that knee is really sort of a question in terms of how good of a player Florida is getting. So he's somewhere between, the 24/7 rankings have him at 92.4 right now, but he was 98.1 before that knee injury. And so if he can recover fully from that ACL injury, then Florida's getting a really good player. And then the two guys that they brought in 2023, they bring in Raymond Cottrell, wide receiver out of Milton, Florida, and then Mac Markway, the tight end out of DeSmet from St. Louis, Missouri, who came in maybe 2 or 3 days before Friday Night Lights. Those guys, both top 100 guys, both on the offensive side of the ball, a wide receiver and a tight end. So certainly Mullen has struggled to bring in top 100 talent on the offensive side of the ball, and he was able to do that. And then you got Jarrett Gibson, a running back out of Gainesville, who commits as well at Friday Night Lights. So, it's one of those things where, yeah, you would love to have 14 guys commit on Friday Night Lights. That's not really what happens. This is more of a relationship building opportunity. This is more for the guys in the 2023 class and the 2024 class than it is for the guys in the 2022 class. And I mean, I've been talking for a while that the 2022 class for Florida is going to be about what the 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021 classes look like, right around 90 at the 24/7 ranking. That's where Mullen has ended up. And right now he's at 89.87 for his player ranking. So, maybe they get a guy like Evan Stewart to pop. He looked awesome there at Friday Night Lights. Things look to be trending up. All the chatter has been that he really got along well with Nick Evers, and that he's sort of trending towards games. So if they could bring him in, that'd be a huge deal, because he's a 5-star guy and really a difference maker, it looks like, on the offensive side of the ball. But even a guy like that raises your overall average to, say, like 91. And that's right around where Florida's going to end up. They're good enough from a recruiting standpoint to end up in the 9th to 12th slots overall, but they're not good enough to be a top 5 recruiting team. That's the way it's been under Mullen pretty much the whole time. And so that's kind of what we should expect. So a productive Friday Night Lights, but still, still for those of us who want to be competing on the recruiting trail with the Georgias and the Alabamas, a little bit underwhelming. But at the same time, whenever you bring in good players, whenever you bring in positive players, you got to say something about that and say, hey, it's a good thing that Florida's bringing in these high level guys. And the 2023 class is really, only 2 guys right now, but both of those guys up around 0.96 or up around 96 ranking on 24/7. That's way above where Florida has been. It's a good start to that class. Now they just have to add to that and make sure that they bring in more top 100 guys.
Markway had a good interview on 24/7 Sports where he really referenced being able to work with Tim Brewster, what he saw from Kyle Pitts last year. So that season has had an impact on the recruiting trail already. Also, Gibson, class of 2024, so getting a little bit of an early start on that one. But the ultimate highlight for me was the Gibbs commitment, Will, out of Winter Park. Like you said, tore the ACL. If you're worried about that, though, the man still had 28 scholarship offers. So he was pretty hot on the recruiting trail still. Visited Florida, LSU, FSU, and Tennessee in June. But I found it interesting. I saw a note from 24/7 Sports. First running back that's signed out of high school with the Gators since 2019, Naquan Wright, just because we've had the transfers come in with Bowman and Lingard. But the video for Gibbs, commitment video, is an all-timer for me. He went out on a boat, did a backflip into the water, emerges from the water with the Gators helmet on and the black visor. It's got the visor, which the helmet and the visor, like Freddie T type of look, all-time look for the Gators in my mind. I love those visors. he's doing the gator chop, followed by carrying a gator head as a football. And got to give a shout out to directorial credit there to Zach Albaverdi too.
Yeah, Zach did a pretty good job. He's done a couple of these commitment videos that have been pretty good. He did Chris Steele's too, so hopefully this commitment turns out better than Chris Steele's.
I gotta put that on that.
but Gibbs. It was a cool video. It was a cool way to sort of announce you're coming to Gainesville. As far as his knee's concerned, I think ACLs just aren't what they used to be, right? It used to be you had an ACL injury and you were worried about somebody's career. Nowadays, an ACL injury for a running back is sort of a rite of passage at some point. I mean, heck, Tom Brady is 44 years old. He's still playing the NFL. He tore his ACL back in 2007. Granted, not a running back.
His speed has not been affected at all.
Well, and so I suspect he's probably gonna go. Well, Brady certainly hasn't, but and then when you talk about Markway, one of the cool things about that is that his father was an Iowa tight end, and his cousin is a South Carolina tight end, and he's a tight end, a high level 4-star tight end coming in, which means not only is he skilled, because usually the stars for those skill positions are because of people who are skilled, but it means he's going to know how to play the position right away, right? He's got that tight end coaching in his bloodlines. He's been coached to play that position since he was a little kid. And so coming in, I expect that, normally it takes a couple of years for guys to really find their way into Mullen systems, especially if it's a guy who's a skill player who then has to learn to come inside and block. Markway should be able to come in and block right away and contribute right away, whether he's contributing through the air or not.
Well, it impact with Brewster and Pitts. That's what he kept talking about that in his commitment video. I would encourage everyone to go check that out on 24/7 Sports. All right, well, let's move on. That was our Friday Night Lights coverage there. Let's move on to 4 Bits. You wrote an article about JT Daniels and what your expectations were for the Georgia starter heading into 2021. I know you don't have great news for us right now, but give us some of the positives from a Gator perspective that we can start with.
Well, the positives from a Gator perspective are that if Kirby Smart can't get it done with JT Daniels the way I expect Daniels to play, then he really is Mark Richt. And we're going to have an awful lot of fun sort of ribbing our Georgia friends. Look, I don't think that JT Daniels has Joe Burrow's background. When I looked at Joe Burrow's high school stats, I went and said, wow, based on that, I think this kid can't miss. When I look at JT Daniels, it's close, but it's not as good as Burrow. So don't expect him to be as good as Burrow, but he doesn't have to be with a team that's as talented as Georgia and still be really, really good. And I think a lot of people look at his USC time and say, okay, he put up a QB rating of 128.6. He threw 10 picks. He took a ton of sacks while he was there. 45 runs for negative 149 yards there that year for USC. And he was injured the next year, taking a sack in the opener against, I think, Arizona State. And you look at that and you go, okay, they're just kind of getting an average quarterback. But what you forget is that the guy reclassified after his junior year of high school, skipped his senior year of high school, and then started as a true freshman at USC. It's pretty impressive to put up a QB rating of 130. And then last year he put up a QB rating up above 170. And so I went and took a look. I looked at all the 5-star transfers and how they've done at their new school, and then sort of separated out to their first 4 games, right? Because Daniels played 4 games last year, and said, okay, in their first 4 games, how did that translate over to the rest of their careers at the places where they transferred? And the answer is pretty well. The answer is, plus or minus about 5 QB rating points between these guys' first 4 games and the rest of the season. Now, the good news is that means he's not Kyler Murray, because Kyler Murray had a QB rating 240 or 210 for his first 4 games and then basically kept that up throughout the year. It also means he's not Justin Fields, because Justin Fields was better in his first 4 and then better in his career at Ohio State than Daniels was late in the year. But it does mean you're kind of looking at a guy who's going to play like Kyle Trask from last year, from 2020. That's kind of probably what you're looking at in terms of what Georgia has available when JT Daniels is out there, assuming he can stay healthy. Because the one thing about Trask is Trask was not a runner, right? He was not somebody who was able to get out of the clutches of the defense, but he did sort of manage the pocket well. There was, if you go back and look at the Ole Miss game, there were some times where he was manipulating the pocket, moving around, able to buy enough time to get somebody open. Daniels, at least last year, was not able to do that. Still took a ton of sacks. And so there's an injury risk, and then there's a risk that, obviously you're going to get strip sacked in a big moment. And then just the standpoint of not being able to hold on and be, not being able to hold on in a critical drive where maybe you take a sack and it kills the drive. So there's a little bit of hope. I don't think I think what you're looking at is probably somebody who's going to perform about as well as Jake Fromm did back in 2016, 2017, or 2017, 2018. But Fromm was good enough to get him to win the SEC and get him to the national championship game. And then Kirby really is the reason that they didn't win the championship. If we're going to be honest, you look at that game in terms of not really even the blown coverage, though obviously that was a big part of it. But the big part in that game was when Georgia was ahead by a ton, they just sort of went into a shell and they went conservative and they decided, we're going to let Tua try to beat us. And turns out that he was able to do that. And so it'll be interesting to see whether Kirby Smart keeps things wide open when things get tight with JT. I mean, I expect them to beat teams like Kentucky by 50. I mean, the question is going to be when you're playing a team like Florida, when you're playing a team like Alabama, when you're playing a team like LSU, when you're playing a team like Auburn, and things get tight late, is he going to trust Daniels, or is he going to just, is he going to like put Daniels out wide and run the Wildcat with his wide receivers? Because that's what he did in that Alabama game. There were some specific games where he ran Wildcat on like 3rd and 5 instead of trusting Jake Fromm, and that's what cost him the game.
Yeah, that was what I thought was the best part about your article. I think we know who JT Daniels is in general. There's a lot of film on him at USC. He's a drop back quarterback. He doesn't have the difference between him and a lot of these names you mentioned with Kyler, Burrow, Fields. He does not have near the mobility of any of those guys. He's more of a traditional style quarterback. Going to sling the ball, able to sling the ball, especially deep. Too bad for him that George Pickens is not going to be able to play this year, but he'll have some different weapons out there still. Of course, we know Eric Gilbert ended up at Georgia too. There's going to be some good weapons for him to get the ball to. But my question for you, Will, you compared him to Kyle Trask. The difference is Kyle Trask has Dan Mullen calling plays. Dan Mullen's going to empty the playbook and do whatever he's got to do at a given moment. He'll take what the defense gives him. Kirby's more stubborn. Kirby's going to do what Kirby wants to do when Kirby wants to do it, for better or for worse. It seems like we've seen him handcuff more talented quarterbacks, quite frankly. I mean, look, like I understand the decision between Fromm and Fields at the time. I understood it, but so you can't put that on Kirby entirely. Although if I'm a Georgia fan, I wish he would have probably spread it out immediately and worked Fields in a lot more his freshman year so that he felt good about coming back for that sophomore year. But we've just seen it time and time again where he just tenses up and goes conservative and counts on the defense and a more talented roster. And it hasn't worked out for Georgia in terms of getting over the hump and winning that title so far.
Well, sure. I mean, they're going to hear 1980 until they finally win one. And we're going to enjoy telling it to them until they finally win one, right? And that's the thing, is that Florida is always going to have something over Georgia and Alabama is always going to have something over Georgia. And all these teams who have won a title under the big boys are always going to have something over Georgia until they can finally get over that hump. And, there is a little bit of Red Sox type mojo when it comes to Georgia, right? That the Buckner, the ball going through Buckner's legs is a lot like Tua hitting the ball on the blown coverage there in the overtime, and then you sort of come back the next year and you're way ahead, and then Jalen Hurts comes in and leads them back to the SEC championship game. And, then you come in the next year and you blow a game to the 3rd string quarterback for South Carolina. And then you come in the next year and you can't cover a wheel route against Florida. And, so there's just sort of this building. And one of the things I think is really interesting, and we talked about this a little bit, is that, Florida fans are frustrated with Mullen in some respects, mostly because of the recruiting, really, because college football is a place where you sell hope, right? And hope is every year you go in going, all right, this is our year, this is our year, this is our year. And Georgia fans are sort of sitting there going, this should be our year. But to your point, is Kirby going to open it up? So I think this is really a referendum. If Kirby Smart can channel his inner Ed Orgeron and sort of turn over all the play calling to Todd Monken and allow Georgia allow JT Daniels to sort of fly, but allow him to do that in big games, right? Like last year in a bowl game against Cincinnati has a pretty good team, but in a bowl game against Cincinnati that really shouldn't have been that close, and Georgia's coming from behind to try to win that game. They had games against South Carolina, Missouri. Daniels played really, really well, but South Carolina, Missouri are not Florida, are not Alabama, are not the big boys in the SEC. And so those are the games that Smart has struggled in, particularly against the Tide. And so he's going to have to win one or two of those in order to get his fan base sort of not back on his side, because that's I think the fans are on his side, but I think they're starting to teeter. I think the same thing's happened in Gainesville, right? I mean, people are looking at Florida going, I know there are some people that if Mullen doesn't win against, if he goes 0-3 this year against Alabama, LSU, and Georgia, he'll be 2-8 against those three teams in his 5 years at Florida. There are gonna be some people who are gonna say that's not good enough. I think the same thing is a possibility up in Athens, right? You got JT Daniels, he puts up a big game, and then if he lays a stink bomb, or if Georgia just takes the ball out of his hands in a big game against Alabama in the SEC title game, or against Florida in Jacksonville, then you're going to hear some grumbling in Athens. And I think you should, right? Because Kirby has spent unbelievable amounts of money on recruiting. They outspend everybody when it comes to that. He's had top 3 classes pretty much ever since he got there. Everybody else with that profile has won a national championship.
They get results.
So,
right.
Yeah, absolutely. And, right. 2 years ago, you would have said Smart's getting results, but they haven't been back since they didn't win the SEC East last year. They didn't win the SEC the year before, and then they blew their shot in the championship the year before that. And, windows close awfully quick in the NCAA, and it may be closing up there in Athens.
Well, and that's the point of stress I look at. If I'm a Georgia fan, I'm incredibly frustrated with how quickly Florida closed the gap with Mullen last year. And you can look at the rosters and say there's still a talent gap, and you'd probably be correct if you went position by position and broke it down. However, I think if Florida's hot on their tail, they're hot on the Bulldogs' tail in terms of who's going to be the dominant force in the East right now, in my opinion, with Dan Mullen coming through here. I think the offense with Emory Jones is going to click this year. I'm looking forward to seeing it. I think this is a major year for Smart, like you're saying, unless he opens it up, channels his inner Ed Ogeron. You said everyone who likes to make fun of Coach O, that's one of the best coaching jobs ever. Just completely changed LSU's identity overnight. And how many coaches have the guts to do that? Kirby has not done that. If Kirby lets go and shows that, but how many times do we have this conversation about Muschamp? Like if Muschamp just gets a guy and let him run the offense, did Muschamp ever do that as a coach? Nope. Coaches tend to be who they are, dude. And so I don't have a lot of confidence that Kirby's all of a sudden going to, I got JT Daniels, I'm going to let him rip. I think we're going to see some things out of Georgia that look awfully familiar this year from the quarterback position.
Well, and I mean, who's an analyst on the Georgia staff this year? William Muschamp.
So he's got in-house inspiration to say, don't just trust your gut, man. Just trust your gut.
He does. It'd be like 3rd and 6, run the ball. 3rd and 6, run the ball.
Come on, we'll punt.
He'd be great to call for a play design in this case. Brent Peace and Charlie Weiss. Let's bring those guys in to have them suggest what we should run. No, I mean it's a great point, right? And it's one of those things where Daniel's going to be good, and the question is going to be, does Kirby get in his way? And that's a fascinating question, because the Georgia team is incredibly talented and should run roughshod over the East and should be a real challenger to Alabama. And they've had Saban on the ropes a couple of times, and then Kirby sort of let him back up. And one of these days he's either going to completely fold, or he's going to put his foot down and all of a sudden stomp somebody. And when that day happens, Georgia will be really dangerous. But until it happens, even you can feel the Georgia fans. Like I said, it's Bucknery back in '86 with the Red Sox. And, is this year the Aaron Boone home run? Or is this year the stolen base and the Poppy coming through and all that sort of stuff? Kurt Schilling with the bloody sock, and maybe they'll have Stetson Bennett out there with a bloody sock there in the game in Jacksonville. And I'll take that.
Well, I think that there's a lot of pressure. I love the Kirby angle in this article. I would encourage everybody to check it out on readerreaction.com. Will's analysis of JT Daniels heading into 2021. Let's move on to 6 bits here. 2022 prospect, now 2021 prospect, number 1 quarterback Quinn Ewers out of Southlake, Texas, Carroll High School, Southlake Carroll. He's decided to skip his senior year of high school. Speaking of skipping your senior year of high school, JT Daniels, to start collecting those NIL dollars, not just to enroll early to play. For the record, the Ohio State quarterback room is already consists of 2 5-star and a 4-star prospect, and they're all there's 2 true freshmen and 2 true freshmen now with Ewers being in there, and 2 redshirted freshmen. So the Buckeyes quarterback room absolutely loaded. Expect that there will be a transfer or 2 out of that room in the next couple of years. We saw that with Joe Burrow a few years back. But Will, is this going to be a new trend? Are we seeing that's the only reason I'm bringing it up right now? We're still in this world of NIL. I know some people want to get on the field talk here, but this is the number one prospect in the country, skipping his senior year of high school. Let me also throw this out. He missed 6 games of his junior year. He ended up coming back and playing the playoffs, led them to a state title last year, state title appearance. But he's only had a total of 22 starts. He's thrown 643 passes in 22 starts, and he's now in Columbus collecting those NIL checks. Will, what do you think about this development?
I mean, can we offer Arch Manning right now and get him to come to Gainesville before he does his senior year of high school? I mean, yeah. I think for guys who were top 15 recruits, this is probably going to start to become the norm for 2 reasons. One, why risk injury in your senior year of high school if you can reclassify, go redshirt somewhere, and somebody's going to pay you, $500,000 to do it. And you heard all the stuff from Saban last week where he's talking about Bryce Young already coming close to making $1 million as a 5-star recruit there starting at Alabama. You don't have to actually play in order. I mean, just look at where the money goes in the college football fan landscape, right? Like 24/7 Sports has subscriptions. ESPN Rivals has subscriptions. Rivals has subscriptions. On3 Sports just started, and they're going to have subscriptions to all of their recruiting stuff. First and 10 Florida has subscriptions to all of their recruiting stuff. People, and even when you look at Read and Reaction, if I write an article about recruiting that I think is written pretty poorly, it does awesome when it comes to numbers. And when I write something that I think is just awesome in terms of what's going on in the field, and I feel like I have a real insight, and I've displayed it, and I've used all these special coach paint tools to display all the things that are going on. I get like half the readership. People are interested in recruiting because recruiting means hope, and so that's all this is. And the reality is that guys who are high level recruits are going to attract dollars. You don't have to be good on the field at Alabama or Ohio State or Clemson or wherever you end up going. You just have to have the hope that you could be good. And there are going to be people who are going to be willing to give you NIL dollars. So yeah, I mean, I think the top 15, maybe even the top 50 players, but we sort of talked a lot about how once you get past that top 50, and really once you get past the top 100, it's really kind of a crapshoot in terms of who turns out to be an elite player and who turns out not to be an elite player. So I don't really expect it to happen that far downstream. Same way that I kind of expect that you're going to have guys like Bryce Young get paid an awful lot. And then there's going to, his left tackle is going to get paid enough. And then, the right guard isn't going to get paid all that much just because, who's paying the right guard. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think a lot of the NIL stuff is interesting. Certainly things are changing. I think it's brilliant by Ohio State because whatever they told the kid, they got him to commit. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that I was sort of harping on last week is that Mullen was talking about, well, we're still sort of exploring what could happen here. The NCAA has like zero authority over any of this stuff. The most dangerous part of NIL is that your players aren't going to pay their taxes. So just bring in an accountant to help them with their taxes and sell them on the fact that you can build their brand and that they can make money. Florida has plenty of boosters, plenty of money, plenty of places where I think the NIL could be applied in ways that are ethical within the rules, but also in ways where you can take advantage of the fact that you're a big blue blood program. And I hope to see them do that. I hope Florida takes advantage, right? Same thing with Texas and Oklahoma coming to the SEC. I'm glad they're coming to the SEC. The reason they're coming to the SEC is because the premier conference in college football, you should have an advantage when you're the Florida Gators in the premier conference in college football when it comes to NIL and when it comes to this sort of recruiting tactic.
Let's go. Accounting firms lining up to recruit college football players now too. I love it. I think this is something where we should just start a whole new issue and start talking about why high school players aren't getting paid enough right now. Let's just start paying the high school players and then we'll keep trickling it down. Everybody will get paid at some point, right?
Hey, my kid's gonna play Pop Warner pretty soon. Let's he's a 5-star Pop Warner recruit, guys. Let's see. Allstate, you want to sponsor him? Let's see what's going on.
Which high school wants him the most? What are you guys offering? Here? I think this is something where people are going to make a major deal of it, but it's unprecedented in terms of the NIL aspect. But we just talked about it with JT Daniels, and we've seen guys constantly, they don't skip their senior season per se, but they do skip their prom. and they skip everything else. Graduation, they've enrolled early in January. That's been going on for a long time. So it's a change. I register it as a medium change, not a major change. Where do you put it, Will?
I mean, I think it's obviously a big change, I think, because 4 years ago this guy would have been ineligible for doing this sort of thing. But I think the reality is that players are going to find ways to maximize their revenue, just like NFL guys do. That going to college has always been a business decision, and that
it
the
makes
NIL
a lot of sense, though. It makes a lot of sense what he's doing. Basically,
sure.
Though. Yeah,
sure. I mean, look, if you gave me the opportunity at 17 years old to drop out of high school or graduate early and make life-changing money, I'm doing it in a second, right? Yeah. Like I told my parents this. So I played baseball for the most part when I was growing up. And if I'd have gotten drafted, I would have gone. And it's like, oh, you're making like, 10 grand a year, 12 grand a year traveling around. It's like, yeah, but you have the opportunity at life-changing money. You can always come back and do the other things. So these guys are having an opportunity to get a college education first off when they go to college, if they really want it. And then the other thing is that they're going to make life-changing money. The thing I think we ought to be careful of or cognizant of is the fact that while many people, and I think, I was on this train, thought it was unethical for the NCAA to call them student athletes and give them a scholarship and then sort of make billions of dollars off of that. I do think that one of the things that was positive is that there were requirements for grade point average and class attendance and all those sorts of things. And we make jokes about the different kinds of majors that athletes are in. And certainly they're required to spend an awful lot of time on their sport. And so finishing up the degree is something that maybe didn't take precedence, but at the same time, it was a priority. May not have been the priority, but it was a priority. And I do think that the NIL and the paying of the players and potentially even the separating of the football programs legally from the university may end up causing harm with that. And that'd be a shame, right? Because this is one of the great things about athletics is it sort of levels the playing field and allows people who wouldn't have normally gone to college to get that opportunity. And so you hope that sort of stays in line. That's the change that I just hope doesn't come along, that it doesn't become all about business and that there's still an educational component to things.
Yeah. I mean, do you think we could ever see the day where, because you're right about the amount of time it takes a student athlete puts in tremendous amount of time into their sport. So to ask them to be, a super intense major, that's just not, it's not realistic. There are a few guys that can handle that type of thing, but not a lot of people can. And is it almost, that's one of the gripes about not paying athletes in the past is, well, yeah, I'm getting this education, but I'm not able to do everything I want with it per se. Like there are limits on what I can do basically. Do you think we'll get to a point where maybe an athlete can enroll in the school and play the sport and then use their eligibility in terms of schooling after they're done playing?
I mean, that would be fine. I think so. Here's the deal. Like I hire people for my day job. I bring in people. I've got people who report to me, and sitting on the other side of that now, where I've got people who are coming in that I'm hiring, I'd hire an athlete in a second. And it's for two reasons. One is that most people don't use the degree that they get in college in their actual lives, right? Once you go to college, it's a credential, but it proves a certain level of ability and diligence and those sorts of things. But at the end of the day, like, unless you do an engineering discipline or unless you're a chemist or something like that, where there's like a specific skill that you've learned, oftentimes it's a credential that says, hey, this person is capable of doing the kind of work that I'm going to hire them to do. The other thing is that anybody who's gone through an athletic program and gotten a degree while they were participating in a high level Division I athletic program, that person has an unbelievable amount of discipline built into them. Right. And so from the standpoint of, am I going to get somebody who's a hard worker? Am I going to get somebody who can push through when things get hard? Am I going to get somebody who's used to failing, who will be able to then pick themselves back up? All the things that athletics teaches us that we talk about when we talk about athletes and we talk about athletics and how they're altruistic and all the lessons that you learn from football. Like I would hire a Florida Gator football player in a second if they applied, and not just because I'm a Florida Gator, but because the understanding of what they have to do to go through to get that degree while they're playing, even if it's not the top priority, even if they don't have the best grade point average, the fact that they're able to do it, so the only thing there is maybe I wouldn't hire an athlete from North Carolina based on their track record of, the papers being written for the, for the players. But other than that, I mean, it says something if you're able to finish that up, man.
Yeah, some fake classes going on there too. I'm pretty sure. I thought you'd hire a Gator football player just to know what did Mullen say to you when he recruited you. I really that'd be something you would do. I feel like.
Tell you what, man, I got openings. People submit your resumes. We'll bring them in. It'll be like me, 2 chemists, and 4 Gators who are just sitting there working on stuff. It'd be great.
All right, let's move on to $1. Fall camp starts on Friday. We got some questions here. Looking to solve some questions here before September 4th kickoff against FAU. And I'm going to start first here, Will. And I'm all about the defense. And really, what's that defensive backfield going to look like? We're obviously going to be relying on some young guys to step into some roles this year, and some guys who didn't play as much as we would have liked at times last year. But it's just a lot of question marks going into the season with that defensive backfield. How are they going to develop?
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting, right? I mean, you got Jason Marshall. Is he going to be able to step in? You've got Jadon Hill. There's been a lot of talk about him stepping up. So I think he was probably one. I mean, Kyrie Elam was the best corner, obviously, but I thought Jadon Hill was somebody who should have gotten more playing time last year. You've got Kembro, who's transferring out. You've got some other young guys who are coming in as well.
Dean's still around.
Including the Missouri transfer who spent like 3 seconds at Missouri. So you Perkins, right? It's Darius Perkins, I think is his name. Right. So you've got all those guys coming in. The question is, how's that going to sort of shake out? I'm actually less concerned about the defensive backfield. The guy I'm looking at is Gavon Dexter. I mean, he's the 5-star guy. He showed flashes last year. I've made no secret. I think he's the key to Grantham having redemption this year, or is the key to Grantham being like, minced meat after the Alabama game where the fan base is ready to just walk him out of town right then, because the linebackers last year got mauled, and elite defensive tackle play is going to be necessary to keep the offensive guys, the offensive linemen off the linebackers. And if you can keep offensive linemen off of Tyron Hopper, off of Derek Wingo, off of Diabate, even off of Ventrell Miller, you're going to free them up to be able to make plays. You get a lot of tackles for loss. You get some turnovers. You get to the quarterback. All of a sudden, it looks like a defense that's able to really hold its own. And the big thing, we haven't seen this since maybe like Dominique Easley and Sharif Floyd, where a Florida defense was able to knock the center, knock the guards back into the backfield, drive into the quarterback's line of sight, and make him throw off of his back foot and be uncomfortable. There have been times, especially since Grantham's come, where off the edge, Florida's been able to get to the quarterback. So, Ja'Kai Polite in year 1, Jonathan Grenard in year 2, nobody last year. But when you think about it, like that was sort of the calling card in terms of where the pressure came from. And then when Florida started to play against elite teams, guys with elite level talent, I think Georgia had a couple of guys drafted in the first round off their offensive line there after the 2019 season. And lo and behold, Florida couldn't get to the quarterback at all and just got carved up. And so if they can get that pressure up through the middle from Dexter, I think that's a huge deal. And I think it sort of cascades its way down and makes everybody else better. I mean, one of the things about that 18 defense is it wasn't that great, but it improved mightily after Adam Schuler and Kyrie Campbell came in, because Tadarius Slayton and I think it was Elijah Conliff were the ones who were starting in games 1 and 2. They switched those guys out for Schuler and Campbell, and all of a sudden things got better. Well, it got better because the defensive tackle play was better.
And Dexter will be a key. Love the additions of Shelton and Newkirk as well to kind of help out the young guy there in Dexter. The running back room, Will, that was one we talked about. How good will Bowman be, and how much will Lingard actually play? What are we anticipating there?
I mean, I don't know what I'm anticipating, right? I mean, Lingard had a knee injury a couple of years ago, sort of the same as we were talking about with Terrence Gibbs, right? You don't really know what you're getting there. Is it the guy from the recruiting profiles who was really, really explosive, or is it somebody who's slowed down and is a little bit tentative and, just hasn't really recovered from the injury? Usually those injuries take a full year to recover from, though. And so this would be the year that he'd really have that explosion back. And if you've got 2 explosive guys in the backfield along with Emory Jones, then I think that really opens up some opportunities. The other place I think, and I don't know what we're going to see in camp, but if you remember, like I think it was 2017 and maybe 2019 camp as well, the rumors about the offensive line were that it was really bad. And then we came out in the year and they were really bad. And oftentimes I sort of take the camp chatter with a grain of salt. Some guy who's showing out in camp and you're like, all right. I mean, but Van Jefferson talk back in 2018 was real. I mean, he was really, really good. I think the offensive line talk in 2019 was definitely real that those guys struggled. And this year, there's a lot of guys who are being replaced. So a guy like Richard Garage going out the left tackle, he's going to be protecting the blind side of Emory Jones. And Jones is young enough that there are going to be some times probably where he holds onto the ball, where he tries to make an extra play because he has the ability to run around and make people miss. And he's going to get hit from the blind side a few times if Garage can't hold up. So I think that might be a big place where we should look at is not, I don't think you're going to hear anything about left tackle, right tackle, left guard, right guard. I think the question is going to be, are they rotating in 8 or 9 guys? Does it feel like guys are interchangeable? Is the defensive line dominating the offensive line? Are we worried because there's only 4 or 5 guys who can actually play up front and they're not, once they bring in the second unit, it gets dominated? Those are the kinds of things I think that'll be interesting that maybe we can glean something from fall camp.
I know we've seen some injuries along the offensive front. I know there's some chatter this past week about the questions of Brenton Cox's status heading into camp. Any other major health concerns that fans should be aware of?
I mean, not that I know of. I think Cox has put out some much. Yeah. Now Cox has put out some stuff that basically showed himself to be healthy. I think one of the things about last year is obviously you got the 10 SEC games, so it was a pretty physical year, but the bowl game happened and then they did spring practice really, really early. So these guys have had an awful lot of time off. They've had an awful lot of time to get stronger. They've had an awful lot of time to sort of heal up, but also get stronger with Savage. And so, I mean, you haven't really heard, there hasn't been anything about knee injuries. There hasn't been anything about guys with sprained ankles, high ankle sprains, nothing like that. Now I'm sure in the fall we'll see it, right? The first couple of days, there will be some guys who aren't necessarily out there on the field and we'll be like, oh, that guy must've gotten injured. But now we haven't heard much about it. And that's a real positive, obviously, because, it's interesting with all the transfers Florida's brought in last year. I think they had the 7th ranked roster overall in terms of talent. And most of the guys that they shed off of the roster were not guys who were high level recruits. So I expect them to be in that 5, 6, 7 range overall talent wise again this year. So we talk about the gap between Florida and Georgia, and I think there's an experience gap. We don't know what Emory Jones can do. We don't know what DeMarcus Bowman can do. We don't know what Tyron Hopper can do. We don't know what Derek Wingo can do. At the same time, those guys, pure talent coming into the program was higher than the guys who have already left. And so, there is a ceiling here that if everybody can stay healthy and 3, 4, 5 guys can really step up and become a big deal, this can be an elite team. I don't think that probably happens. I think you're probably looking at, 9-3, 10-2, but there is a possibility. And the good news about Mullen is you've almost always got a floor of I would say 8-4 is like the worst you could expect. And 9-3 is almost always the floor any other year. And if Emory Jones turns out to be really, really good, or if Anthony Richardson turns out to be really, really good, then, you have an opportunity to go higher than that.
Injuries is always something that's a concern. This roster in particular, there's a lot of what ifs at so many different positions. You hope the injury bug. Sometimes, some years it's on your side, some years it's against you. This is one of those years we really need it to be in our favor because you're right about the talent level. It's certainly there. Just got to hope. Talk about guys like Gervon Dexter. It's just being so critical to how this year is going to go. We have a lot of those pieces in different positions that there's maybe not the depth you want in terms of experience just yet. And you'd like to see a little bit of that experience get on the field this year and give those other guys time to develop. Will, another talented player that we saw last year, didn't really put up big numbers, but when you see him on the field, looks like a total beast. Justin Shorter. I know big things are expected out of Copeland. I know Whittemore's your guy you've identified as having a breakout year too. Any hopes that the 5-star Penn State transfer is going to break out this year?
No, I mean, I think he's going to be a good player. I don't think I saw anything last year that says, oh yeah, send it, shoot him a screen and he's going to take it to the house. That, I rewatched the Oklahoma game the other day just to sort of look at some Emory Jones tape, and that was kind of depressing. Shorter got hit in the hands a couple of times on late passes and on deep passes, wasn't able to bring him in. So he does have the ability to get past the defense, and he's big enough that even if he's not past the defense, he can go up and get it. Maybe he's gotten an opportunity to get more of those reps. And Emory Jones, for for all of the sort of questioning about his ability to throw downfield because Dan Mullen hasn't let him do it that much, he does throw a really pretty ball down the sideline when he throws a deep pass. And there was one against Georgia his freshman year. He threw a couple last year against Oklahoma. So I think there's going to be some opportunities there. I'm just not sure if Shorter's the guy you send on those routes. Shorter seemed like last year, like they were almost treating him like a tight end that they had split out wide, as opposed to treating him like a true wide receiver. So if I was going to pick a guy to break out, it'd be Keon Zipper. I think he's the guy who's probably the one you look at and go, okay, nobody had him on their all SEC teams in the preseason, but after he gets a full year in, he's been in the program for a couple of years now. And when he gets an opportunity to start, he's a little bit more stocky than Pitts or even Kamori Gamble. But especially in the Oklahoma game, every ball that got thrown to Zipper just stuck to his hands. And that was not the case with Shorter, and that was not the case with Gamble. And so I'd really like to see Rick Wells and then Keon Zipper, the two guys that I think, in addition to Whittemore, can really, I think, build into this wide receiving core.
I'm not trying to spoil what's coming next year on readingreaction.com, but I know you're digging a little bit into AR-15, as you call him, Anthony Richardson. What role are we expecting for Richardson this year?
So, I mean, it's hard to tell, right? Because there was so little actual tape on him last year. A lot of stuff that I think was impressive in that Oklahoma game, but obviously when you're down like 55-13 or whatever the score was, the defense is sort of laying back. I also think that there were a couple of plays there where you look at it and go, okay, that's an impressive individual play, but he didn't execute the play right. Mm-hmm. And so that I think is going to be the challenge is that, going from Kyle Trask, who seemed to execute the play correctly all the time, to guys like Emory Jones. The question is going to be in camp, how often can Emory Jones execute the play right? How often can Anthony Richardson execute the play right? I think there's some evidence in the Oklahoma game that Richardson still has a ways to go to do that. The good news is even when he doesn't execute it right, sometimes it still turns into a 30-yard gain because he's athletic enough to get away with it. At the same time, I think that is the concern. The concern is on 3rd and 5, late in enemy territory, when you need that first down, you can't have somebody who's freelancing. And I think that's one of the reasons why Mullen tends to go with more experienced quarterbacks. And then the other thing is that Emory Jones in that first half, at least against Oklahoma, was able to get a first down pretty much every time they just sort of ran the power. They pulled the guard and ran a power right behind the running back and had the extra blocker, and it was 5 yards automatic every time. And, you can't do that all year long because Jones won't be able to hold up if you do that. But I do think there are going to be some opportunities where, like a drive where you need to give your defense a blow, where, let's say Georgia takes the lead and you just need to drive down the field, but you got to do it in a way that gives your defense some time to recover. Like Emory Jones is going to be able to supply that. I think there are going to be a couple of drives this year where they just say, go get it. And he's going to run read options. They're going to run some power plays. And it's going to be 2nd and 2 every time he's out there, because it's just going to be that, and eventually he's going to break one because the defense is going to get tired. And like I said, if you've got Lingard and Bowman in the backfield, and all of a sudden you can start, I'm almost thinking, you remember the play against Michigan a few years ago where they pitched it out to Scarlett? They completely, like, Michigan was really crashing in to try to stop the run up the middle. It was down in the goal line, and then they pitched it out to either P. Ryan or Scarlett, and he just sort of walked into the end zone. I think they're going to be able to do some stuff like that where they have some misdirection and things like that, just because of the way Emory Jones and AR-15, if he's in there, are able to run the ball.
That's what I'm excited. I'm excited about playing Alabama first, because of that very reason. There's not going to be a ton of tape on how this roster looks yet. And I think that's advantage Mullen overall. So I like playing Alabama game 3. It might be a little early for this roster, but Bama's replacing some dudes too. So we'll see how that goes. Maybe the lack of tape will be in Mullen's favor with this roster. Will, you got any final thoughts, and you want to give any previews on what's coming up this week on Read and Reaction?
Yeah, so like you said, I'm working on something. It's probably going to be on the YouTube channel for Anthony Richardson. It's going to be a little short video. Obviously, this is going to be up there. We really appreciate everybody following us and subscribing. We're at 925 now, so we're 75 away from 1,000. So we are actually debating before this episode, before it went on live, are we going to do something Patreon after the games this year, or are we going to do something that we just post up on the YouTube channel right away? I think we're pretty sure we're going to just post it up on the YouTube channel if we can get to 1,000 subscribers. So please help us out there. And then I think there will be an article up hopefully about Emory Jones later this week. I've been working on this like all off season, and I keep getting caught up with other things, and other things come up. And then I have a mailbag coming up too. I had requested questions a couple of weeks ago from people, and some other things have gotten in the way just because of NIL and some other things. So so that'll be coming up this week. And then we've got another Pell article coming up later this week. Yep. For you. So you're going to have that Charlie Pell article up this week. And are you doing a research room this week?
Yeah, last week. So Rob's actually testing taking the NFLPA exam. So he's studying right now. He's got some study sessions going on. So he's studying to be an NFL agent right now. So
that's pretty awesome. Yeah. So we got some NIL stuff going on here with Stand Up and Holler, buddy.
You might be able to answer some of our legal questions. He might be able to answer some of those. So we've been taking a little pause on that to let Rob study a little bit. So good luck to Rob on his test.
Absolutely. That'll be great. Actually, anybody who hasn't had a chance to go over there to the Read and Reaction YouTube channel, and Nick and Rob have been doing this research room that, looks a little bit more in depth on specific players. And there's a DeMarcus Bowman episode over there. There's some other stuff that's really, really good. So if you like Stand Up and Holler, we're a little bit different format, but from the research room, but something a little bit different. And Rob certainly brings his own unique take to the situation there. So we're great having him on board, and looking forward to you guys doing that during the season as well.
Yep. And everybody, we appreciate the support. We're getting close to that 1,000. Let's drive it up there. Let's do it soon. Looking forward to it. Another week closer to the season. Will, I'm going to keep saying it. It's August, man. Football. There's college football this month.
Yeah, man.
College football this month. It's crazy.
It's getting darker sooner up here, which is usually kind of depressing because the summer is ending. But it's also a sign that the college football is on the horizon. And considering the way last season went and how screwy it was, and how we were all inside, and it was just weird. It's kind of nice. I know there are some cases that are creeping up, and that the case numbers are creeping up in Florida. So certainly, hopefully, everybody stays safe down there. But if nothing else, let's make sure we quash this this squall of COVID so that we're ready to go when it comes time to kick things off in the swamp, man.
Didn't hold us back last year. Let's go. We're gonna be back strong this year. I'm looking forward to it. Start next month here. All right. Well, thank you for joining us for another episode of Stand Up and Holler. And as always, go Gators.
Go Gators.
Thank you for watching this episode of Stand Up and Holler. Be sure to subscribe to the Read and Reaction YouTube channel, join our Patreon community at Read and Reaction for bonus content each week, and check out our website at readandreaction.com. I'm Nick Knutson, joined by Will Miles, and as always, go Gators.